checking in here at the Battle of Cowpens here in Gaffney, South Carolina. And just checking in here. As you can see, here's the monument. Kind of waiting for some more people to kind of check in a little bit, but just gonna start walking toward the battlefield right now, and gonna walk some of the battlefield here, and stuff, as we're gonna start meandering down this pathway here. But the Battle of Cowpens happened during the Revolutionary War. For those that may or may not know, just walking to the battlefield right now, so just bear with me. Anywho, for those that aren't aware, this was a very important battle. I guess that we're going to talk a little bit about the battle and some of the significance of it, and also go a little bit over some of the other details of other relevant information. If you have any questions, please, you're more than welcome to chime in and stuff. Just starting to kind of walk a little bit toward the battlefield right now, so just bear with me as we're kind of waiting for a few more people to check in and stuff. But this is actually a really nice battlefield for those that are unaware. This battlefield here is in Gaffney, South Carolina area. We are about maybe 45 minutes approximately, depending on how fast you drive, from Charlotte. We are west of Charlotte right now, so it's not too far away, so we're relatively close. So of course we're in between, we're east of Spartanburg, for those that are close to Spartanburg. So we're not too far away from there, but anywho, we are just now walking up on the Green River Road right here at the battlefield. So we will be able to talk a little bit about the battle, a little bit about it. So here is the road in which the battle took place on, or near, for the battle. For those that are just checking in, please like and subscribe to the channel. Anyways, one thing that I will say about the battle is that some of Morgan's army came from several states, from North and South Carolina, a few from Delaware, Georgia, Maryland, and Virginia. They were all joined by the militia. And also some of these people, some of the militia had taken part in the Battle of Kings Mountain, in sorts. So for those that are unaware of that, some of the militia had taken part in Kings Mountain, which I find pretty interesting. As we're walking up to where the battlefield is right here, as you may or may not know. But for those that don't know, there were, as far as for the Patriots, there was 3 lines for the Patriots. The sharpshooters and skirmishers up at the front, in the first line. Then the second line is where some of the militia were, and then the third line is where the Continentals were. So then, of course, you had Tarleton's men on the opposite end of the battlefield, which is pretty fascinating to see how they started the whole thing. But anyways, as we're walking up to the first point here, anyways, this is somewhat similar as far as the battlefield itself. This is somewhat kind of similar to what it would have looked like during the time. They've had to kind of restore some of the battlefield as some of it was being used for other things, so they've kind of had to restore it in its own way, you know, with some of the vegetation and stuff and all that sorts. But anywho, this is the map right here, as you can see. And then this is the road that we're on right here, as you can see. For those that don't know, we're probably maybe right around here, give or take a little bit, around that general area. But Morgan chose this particular area for its tactical advantages. You know, a river to the rear to kind of discourage some of the militia and sorts from running. You know, and of course some of the layouts of the land. You know, some of the land kind of helped hide the actual Continentals in the third line, which was definitely a pretty interesting approach. So there were some tactical advantages as to why Morgan chose this land or this particular area versus others, which is pretty cool in my opinion. But as far as the layout goes, as far as the layout of the Patriot forces, again, to kind of emphasize the approach that Daniel Morgan used, was that he used a in-depth defense. I think I'm saying it right. In which the first line was like skirmishers, and then the second line was the militia, and then the third line was the Continental line. So then, of course, there was some cavalry. The opposing side was in charge. Actually, the opposing side had Tarleton in charge, Bannister Tarleton. You know, and him being the rough and gruff guy that he is, you know, when the British approached, you know, he kind of, you know, as soon as he kind of saw the Patriots, he said, "Oh, we got to go and hurry up and defeat them and beat them," you know, and so he was all gung-ho about the whole thing and stuff. So him being the one that he is, chose to, you know, just charge forward. And then, you know, from there it kind of turned into a whole spectacle. But again, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer it for you. Answer your questions if you have any. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you have any input. Please give it. I'm definitely willing to answer your questions on the actual battle the best I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll certainly do what I can to answer it later on. But anyways, Tarleton was the opposing military officer during this battle. I think that this particular battle is interesting. I think that I know that me saying this is going to come off as a little upsetting to some, or come off as something weird to some people. But personally, I think, although I think that this battle is very, very significant, as it is, this battle was very, very significant, as it definitely showed that the Patriots could definitely win. I think that there are some other battles that are almost as significant in their own way, especially the Battle of Musgrove's Mill, which happened 3 days after the Battle of Camden. So for those that don't know, that particular battle happened several days, like 3 days after Camden. And I think that was something, I think that was a particular battle that was very important because it showed that the Patriots were capable of winning battles. And then, of course, you have other battles that took place, such as the Battle of Ramsar's Mill, that also took place during, the time period and stuff. So it's kind of one of those things in which I find very significant. The Battle of Ramsar's Mill took place. What happened with that battle is that was a battle that took place between the loyalists that were loyal to the king versus the Patriot militia. I think that particular battle was important in its own way because of the simple fact that it kind of helped tamp down the loyalist participation in the war. So it kind of discouraged the loyalists from wanting to partake. So that was another battle that I found very, very significant in its own right. So it's all a matter of perspective. So by me saying that, I'm not sitting here talking down on the significance of Cowpens, but personally, I feel that there's other battles that are very important too in their own way. Again, if you have any questions, please ask them. Would love to answer them the best I can. If I don't have the answer, I'll let you know, and I'll do what I can to answer the question later on. Anyways, so this area right here, as you can see, is the first significant, part of the actual battlefield itself. So this line right here, this is where one of the lines here would have been, maybe just behind us, just behind us a few feet, would have been where the Continentals, the Patriot Continentals would have been on the Patriot side. So those would have consisted of Maryland and some of the Maryland men and some of the Delaware, as then of course at one point or another the militia ended up here. One thing that I will note about this particular battle is that with this particular battle is that how yes, there were 3 lines, as I mentioned earlier, but Daniel Morgan set up the lines maybe 100 yards apart, 1 to 200 yards, give or take. So they weren't too far apart. They may have even been closer than that. But nonetheless, they were somewhat close to each other, which was interesting in its own way. That's what I find cool. But anywho, as far as the pretty much that was the layout of the battle. Now let's go up here a little bit further, and we'll see what else we can find here. I'm trying to spare you all the whole spectacle and all the boring details. But as I said, I think that the Battle of Cowpens was a very significant battle. But I think that in the grand scheme of things, yes, it was important. But I think that in the grand scheme of things, though, there was other battles that took place that were just as important. I know that King's Mountain is always talked about. But anyways, the terrain here looked somewhat similar as to what it did during that time period. And what makes it so interesting is that we'll get to a certain point up yonder in which you'll notice the terrain when looking back behind us. You'll notice that the terrain will kind of hides the Continentals in its own way. Now, one thing that I'll notice, or that I'll make note of, is that while for those that have seen the movie The Patriot, yes, there's a lot of inaccuracies about that particular movie. So that's been clearly stated. So before I go on to the next part, I might get yelled at for saying this. But let me state that yes, there's a lot of inaccuracies about that movie. But I think that one thing that the movie does, not necessarily get correct 100%, but one thing that it does, one thing that it does make known is that there was some varying about the terrain, especially it's kind of like when the British are approaching the militia and all that stuff. It's like yeah they're approaching, but then of course when you look at the Patriots head on, you don't see the Continentals in the third line or whatever. So it's like you sit there and think the battle's going to be won by, the battle's going to be fought with the militia and stuff. Oh, where's the Continentals? They're not here or whatever. But I think that one thing that the movie The Patriot does somewhat get right is the fact that the terrain hides the Continentals in that third line. Again, I hate referencing that movie because I think that the movie does have quite a few inaccuracies in it. But I think that's one of the few things that it does get right, though, is somewhat of the terrain of that third battle, or that last battle, which is the Battle of Cowpens. So for those that don't know, that big final battle in The Patriot is Cowpens. And some of that movie was filmed at historic Brattonsville, which is cool. So you can go by historic Brattonsville and you'll probably notice a few similarities or like a few places within the actual site itself that look familiar. So you'll see that particular place, some of those places at that site are in the movie The Patriot. So for those that don't know, now you do. If that makes sense. So some of the places at historic Brattonsville were in that movie. But anyways, back to the battlefield here. If you have any questions, please let us know. Please post them in the comments and I'll do what I can to answer. So if you can, make sure that you please like and subscribe to the channel. Definitely like the video and subscribe to the channel if you can. Um, but anyways, let's kind of go to the next step here. Um, we're not going to walk the whole battlefield, every step of it, though, but we will walk quite a bit of it. Now, this right here is another line in which this was the second line, which was right here. This is where the militia was, the general area of where the militia was. So pretty much, it was about sunrise when the British appeared. The battle kind of started just about sunrise. Although the militia, though not trained to stand against the massed British bayonets, did fight pretty well and shot with pretty deadly effort here. So they did fight pretty well here on this particular area. And as I'm trying to kind of look back a little bit to kind of show some emphasis on the fact that the battlefield terrain does do a pretty fair job at hiding the Continentals in the third line. So again, this is where this is the area in which the second line is at. This area right here, this general spot. So the third line was back there, as I mentioned before. The third line is back there, and that consisted of the Continentals from Delaware and Maryland and such. Then of course you have the militia here, right along this line here. And then you also have the first line, in which had the skirmishers and sharpshooters and such, as we're approaching the first line here. And by the way, this is the whole battlefield is about a mile long approximately. So for those that are the exercising type, you can definitely run the battlefield or walk the battlefield for those that choose to do so. I personally will be walking it. But that's just a personal choice. But again, this is some of the battlefield here. Now we're coming up on the first line here. This is where the sharpshooters and the some of the skirmishers were and stuff. So this was the first line right here. So as you can see where that fake militiaman is right there. But pretty much goes over this. Goes all the way to there. Now, this is the skirmish line. So this is where the first line would have been. So the sharpshooters pretty much sat right here. They waited until about Tarleton's army got within shooting distance. So they were pretty much within a pretty close range here. They were pretty much, the orders were to pretty much slow the British's progress. As far as their advance and stuff, and also to take out some of the British's officers and such. Of course, a lot of the people in the first line had rifles, and their orders were to fire, and then of course go back to the second line. As the British came within range of the militia, they actually delivered a pretty deadly volley there, dropping about 2/3 of the officers, and then funneled back through the Continental line as well. Once they got the second, first, second, and then third, and kind of hang out, by the Continentals and such. So again, this is where the first line would have been right here. I'm pretty much in line with the first line. The British would have been, first British line would have been like up yonder, or that little area is up there. It's like right up there. So in essence, that's pretty much where they would have been. If you have any questions, please let us know. I'll do what I can to answer your questions. So for those that are checking in, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Definitely appreciate it. So stay tuned for more information. But this is pretty much some of the battlefield. I do plan on coming out here and doing a full video, like a full-scale video. I've previously made some full-scale videos previously, but in an effort to kind of change things up, I am in the works of redoing some of my script for that and kind of getting some more or better information on the battle itself. I kind of like to revisit some of the topics that I've done previously, just for the sake of just revisiting certain topics, just because some people do like to have